History books love geniuses, but honestly, the idiots shaped the world just as much. One wrong turn started World War I. One guy's toilet flushing sank a submarine. One man's two inventions poisoned the entire planet's atmosphere. These aren't random nobodies, these are generals, presidents, scientists, and dictators who had every resource, every advisor, every reason to make the right call, and they didn't. 33 spectacular failures, some funny, some deadly, all absolutely real. 1. In 1945, German U-boat technology was the pride of the Kriegsmarine. Cutting edge, deadly, and apparently equipped with a toilet so complicated it needed an engineering degree to flush. Captain Karl-Adolf Schlitt commanded U-1206, a submarine with a fancy new high-pressure toilet system designed to work at crushing ocean depths. The problem? Schlitt decided to use this marvel of German engineering without reading the manual. He turned the wrong valve. Seawater flooded in. That water hit the batteries below. And when seawater meets battery acid, you get chlorine gas, which is basically weaponized death fumes filling your sealed metal tube. Schlitt had to surface immediately, right in front of British aircraft. The crew scuttled the sub to avoid capture. One man died, several were captured, and the war's most advanced submarine was destroyed because its captain couldn't figure out how to flush. Germany lost a U-boat to a bowel movement. 2. Gary Hoy was a successful Toronto lawyer with an unusual party trick. He loved proving to visitors that the windows in his 24th floor office at the Toronto Dominion Centre were unbreakable. His method? Running full speed at the glass and body checking it like a hockey player. He'd done this dozens of times. The glass held every single time because it was, in fact, incredibly strong. In 1993, during a demonstration to a group of law students, Hoy charged at the window once more, and the glass did exactly what he always promised. It didn't break, it just popped out of the frame entirely, taking Hoy with it on a 24-story journey to the courtyard below. He was technically correct. The glass never shattered. The building's engineers later confirmed the windows could withstand tremendous impact. They just weren't designed for repeated horizontal trauma from a full-grown man. Hoy won the argument and lost everything else. 3. In 1859, Thomas Austin arrived in Australia and thought to himself, "You know what this continent needs? Rabbits, for hunting." So he released 24 wild rabbits onto his estate in Victoria. Just 24 fluffy little creatures. What could possibly go wrong? Well, rabbits breed like, well, rabbits. Within a decade, Austin's cute hunting hobby had multiplied into millions. By the 20th century, Australia was dealing with billions of rabbits consuming crops, destroying native vegetation, and causing erosion across the entire continent. The government tried fences spanning thousands of miles. They tried poison. They introduced diseases. They hired professional hunters. Nothing worked. To this day, rabbits remain one of Australia's worst ecological disasters, causing hundreds of millions of dollars in damage annually. Thomas Austin wanted a bit of sport on Sunday afternoons. Instead, he single-handedly created an environmental apocalypse that has lasted over 160 years. 24 rabbits. Billions of consequences. 4. The Battle of Karansebes in 1788 might be the most embarrassing military disaster in human history, and the enemy wasn't even there. The Austrian army, roughly 100,000 strong, was marching to fight the Ottoman Turks. One night, some soldiers crossed a river and found a group of locals selling schnapps. They bought it all and got spectacularly drunk. When other soldiers arrived and demanded a share, a fight broke out. Someone fired a shot. In the darkness and chaos, different ethnic groups in the Austrian army, who spoke different languages, couldn't understand each other's shouts. Someone screamed, "Turks!" as a joke or warning. Panic spread instantly. Cavalry charged infantry. Artillery fired into their own ranks. Soldiers fled in every direction, trampling each other. By morning, the Austrians had killed or wounded somewhere between 1,000 and 10,000 of their own men. The Ottoman army arrived 2 days later to find a field of Austrian corpses and an empty, traumatized camp. They took the city without a fight. 5. The year was 1927, and Hollywood was about to change forever with the introduction of synchronized sound in films. Warner Brothers was developing this revolutionary technology, but not everyone in the company was convinced. Harry Warner, one of the founding brothers, famously responded to the idea of talking pictures with absolute bewilderment. "Who the hell wants to hear actors talk?" he reportedly asked. In his mind, movies were a visual art form. Adding dialogue would be a gimmick, a fad that audiences would reject. Of course, just 1 year later, Warner Brothers released The Jazz Singer, the first major talking picture, and it became a sensation that transformed the entire industry. Silent film stars saw their careers evaporate overnight while a new era of cinema was born. Harry Warner's company literally pioneered the technology he thought was pointless. He was standing on a gold mine while complaining about all the useless yellow rocks. 6. In 1995, McArthur Wheeler robbed 2 banks in Pittsburgh in broad daylight with no mask, no disguise, and absolute confidence. His security system? Lemon juice smeared all over his face? Wheeler had learned that lemon juice could be used as invisible ink, only appearing when heated. His brilliant conclusion: if it makes ink invisible, it must make faces invisible too. At least to cameras. He reportedly even tested this theory by taking a Polaroid selfie with lemon juice on his face, and when the photo came out blurry because he likely aimed wrong, he took this as proof that his plan was genius. The bank cameras captured his unobscured face perfectly. Police arrested him that same night. When shown the footage, Wheeler was genuinely stunned. "But I wore the juice," he muttered. This case inspired psychologists to study what's now called the Dunning-Kruger effect, where incompetent people are too incompetent to realize they're incompetent. McArthur Wheeler became the scientific poster child for confident stupidity. 7. During the Cold War, the Central Intelligence Agency had many questionable ideas, but Operation Acoustic Kitty might be the peak of expensive absurdity. In the 1960s, the CIA spent approximately $20 million to turn a regular house cat into a sophisticated surveillance device. Surgeons implanted a microphone in the cat's ear canal, a radio transmitter at the base of its skull, and ran an antenna through its tail. The plan was to release this feline spy near Soviet targets and eavesdrop on sensitive conversations. After years of development and testing, the moment finally came for the first real mission. The cat was released near the Soviet compound in Washington. It walked into the street and was immediately hit by a taxi. $20 million, countless man-hours, cutting-edge surgical procedures, and the most advanced miniaturized technology of the era, all destroyed in 5 minutes by a standard yellow cab. The project was quietly discontinued. 8. Idi Amin, the dictator of Uganda from 1971 to 1979, was famous for many things: brutal repression, erratic behavior, and giving himself titles like His Excellency, President for Life, Lord of all the beasts of the earth and fishes of the seas. But perhaps his most absurd moment came in 1978 when he officially declared war on the United States of America. The entire United States, the country with the world's largest military, nuclear arsenal, and global reach. Amin sent a telegram announcing hostilities. The Pentagon's response? Nothing. They didn't even acknowledge it. Amin waited approximately 1 day, then declared victory. He announced that Uganda had defeated America, that the imperialist enemy had been vanquished, and that he was now the conqueror of the Western superpower. He even awarded himself medals for this triumph. Washington never commented. They probably never noticed. Amin celebrated his imaginary victory for years, proving that you can win any war if you're the only one who knows it's happening. 9. Thomas Midgley Jr. might be the single most environmentally destructive individual in human history, and he achieved this through pure innovation. In the 1920s, he solved the problem of engine knock by adding tetraethyl lead to gasoline. Leaded gasoline poisoned the atmosphere for decades, causing brain damage, increased crime rates, and countless deaths worldwide. But Midgley wasn't done. He then invented chlorofluorocarbons, known as CFCs, as a safe refrigerant. These chemicals proceeded to tear a hole in the ozone layer, protecting Earth from solar radiation. One man, two inventions, and more environmental damage than entire nations typically achieve. Historians have noted that Midgley had more negative impact on Earth's atmosphere than any other single organism in planetary history. The irony continued to his death. After contracting polio, he designed an elaborate system of ropes and pulleys to help himself out of bed. In 1944, he became entangled in his own invention and accidentally strangled himself. 10. In 1904, Russia sent its Baltic fleet on an 18,000-mile journey to fight Japan in what became history's most catastrophically incompetent naval expedition. Under Admiral Zinoviy Rozhestvensky, the 2nd Pacific Squadron achieved legendary levels of failure before ever seeing an enemy ship. Near England, they spotted fishing boats and convinced themselves these were Japanese torpedo boats, so they opened fire on British fishermen, nearly starting a war with Britain. They shot at each other in the confusion. They sent panicked telegrams about Japanese ships in the North Sea, which makes no geographic sense. During stops in Africa, officers bought exotic animals including snakes, crocodiles, and a baboon. Ships collided constantly. Coal dust explosions were routine. Sailors developed tropical diseases. One ship stopped to have its hull scraped of barnacles for 3 weeks. When they finally reached Japan after 7 months, the Japanese Navy destroyed them in approximately 45 minutes at the Battle of Tsushima. 11. In 2016, the upscale British supermarket chain Waitrose launched what seemed like a harmless promotion: free coffee for anyone with a loyalty card. Sign up, get free coffee forever. The marketing team imagined attracting more affluent shoppers who would browse the organic produce while sipping their complimentary flat white. The reality was different. Word spread quickly among London's taxi drivers, who realized they could get unlimited free coffee during their long shifts. Then the homeless community discovered that Waitrose offered warm drinks and comfortable seating with no purchase requirement. Soon, certain Waitrose locations transformed into unofficial shelters and cab driver break rooms. Customers complained about finding seats occupied by people who had no intention of buying anything. Some locations reported entire extended families setting up camp for hours. The company tried to quietly limit the promotion but faced backlash for discriminating against non-buyers. They learned an expensive lesson: never underestimate people's ability to optimize a free offer in ways you never anticipated. 12. Franz Reichelt was a tailor living in Paris in the early 1900s with a dream. He would invent a wearable parachute that aviators could deploy if their plane went down. He spent years designing and refining what he called a parachute suit, a coat that would supposedly unfold into a working parachute during a fall. His tests with dummies from his apartment window showed mixed results, by which I mean the dummies usually crashed. But Reichelt remained convinced his design would work with a real person inside because human movement would somehow help it deploy properly. On February 4, 1912, he got permission to test his invention from the Eiffel Tower, supposedly using a dummy. Instead, he showed up wearing the suit himself. Onlookers and film cameras watched as Reichelt stood on the first platform, hesitated for 40 seconds, and jumped. The parachute suit never deployed. He fell 187 feet, leaving a measurable impact crater in the frozen ground below. Confidence is important, but so is testing. 13. Dan Quayle served as Vice President of the United States under George H.W. Bush, and he is primarily remembered for one catastrophic moment in a New Jersey elementary school in 1992. During a spelling bee photo opportunity, 12-year-old William Figueroa correctly spelled the word potato on the blackboard. Quayle, holding a flashcard prepared by the school with an error on it, told the student he was wrong and instructed him to add an E at the end, making it potato. The cameras captured everything: a sitting vice president correcting a child's correct spelling with incorrect spelling. The national media went absolutely wild. Quayle became an instant punchline, a symbol of political incompetence. He tried to blame the flashcard, which technically did have the misspelling, but the damage was permanent. This single moment overshadowed everything else in his political career. He served during the end of the Cold War, the Gulf War, and major economic changes, but history remembers him as the potato guy. 14. When Germany launched its invasion of France in May 1940, the French army was actually larger and better equipped than many people remember. They had more tanks than Germany. They had fortifications. What they didn't have was a competent commander. General Maurice Gamelin, the French supreme commander, refused to install a telephone or radio in his headquarters. He considered electronic communication unreliable and possibly intercepted. Instead, he commanded the defense of France using motorcycle couriers. Paper messages, delivered by men on bikes during a blitzkrieg. The Germans were moving their panzer divisions dozens of miles per day, while Gamelin's orders took hours or days to reach their destinations. By the time his commands arrived, the tactical situation had completely changed. His headquarters was so isolated that when the German breakthrough at Sedan occurred, Gamelin didn't learn about it until the following morning. France fell in 6 weeks. The motorcycle courier system remained undefeated technically. It just couldn't outrun tanks. 15. On November 21, 1980, a drilling crew from Texaco accidentally created one of the most bizarre industrial disasters in American history at Lake Peigneur in Louisiana. They were drilling for oil beneath the lake when their 14-inch drill bit punched through the ceiling of the Diamond Crystal salt mine, an enormous underground salt mine that extended beneath the lake bed. The small hole quickly became a massive whirlpool as the lake began draining into the mine like water down a bathtub drain. The drill platform, 11 barges, a tugboat, and 65 acres of shoreline were sucked underground. The mine's 350 feet of depth created such powerful suction that a canal connecting the lake to the Gulf of Mexico actually reversed its flow, creating a temporary 150-foot waterfall as the ocean refilled the empty lake basin. Miraculously, all 55 mine workers escaped through the tunnels. The lake, once 11 feet deep with fresh water, is now 200 feet deep and filled with salt water. Texaco paid $32 million in damages. 16. Jean Bedel Bokassa seized power in the Central African Republic in 1966 and spent a decade consolidating authority before deciding in 1977 that simply being president wasn't prestigious enough. He would become an emperor, not metaphorically. An actual emperor with a coronation ceremony modeled directly after Napoleon Bonaparte's 1804 coronation. The ceremony cost somewhere between $20 and $30 million, roughly 1/3 to 1/2 of the entire nation's annual budget. Bokassa commissioned a golden throne, a jewel-encrusted crown, and a golden eagle-shaped scepter. He rode through the capital in a gold-plated horse-drawn carriage imported from France. The French government, inexplicably, helped pay for much of this. The ceremony featured thousands of guests and 2,000 musicians. Meanwhile, the Central African Republic remained one of the poorest nations on Earth, with almost no paved roads, hospitals, or schools. 2 years later, Bokassa was overthrown and fled to France. The French troops who removed him found evidence suggesting he had eaten some of his political opponents. 17. In September 1999, NASA lost the Mars Climate Orbiter, a $125 million spacecraft, because of a mistake so simple it sounds fake. The orbiter was designed to study the Martian climate and serve as a communications relay. After its 9-month journey, the spacecraft approached Mars for orbital insertion, fired its thrusters, and disappeared behind the planet. It never came back. The investigation revealed the problem. Lockheed Martin, the contractor who built the spacecraft's thrusters, had programmed them using imperial units, specifically pound-seconds of force. NASA's navigation team, who calculated the trajectory, used metric units, Newton seconds. Nobody noticed the discrepancy during the entire development and flight period. The orbiter approached Mars at the wrong altitude, entering the atmosphere instead of orbiting, and either burned up or bounced off into space. One team used feet and pounds. Another team used meters and newtons. Nobody converted anything. An entire Mars mission lost because of a conversion error taught in middle school physics class. 18. General Luigi Cadorna commanded the Italian army during World War I and achieved something remarkable. He managed to fight 12 separate battles at the same river and lose every single one. The Isonzo River, on the Italian-Austro-Hungarian border, became the site of Cadorna's obsessive frontal assaults from 1915 to 1917. Each time, he ordered his men to charge directly into entrenched Austrian positions. Each time, they were slaughtered. Each time, Cadorna blamed his soldiers for lacking courage and ordered decimation, the ancient Roman practice of executing every 10th man in units that retreated. He removed over 200 generals and thousands of officers for incompetence, meaning they questioned his suicidal tactics. After the catastrophic defeat at Caporetto in 1917, where Italian lines collapsed and 300,000 soldiers surrendered, Cadorna was finally removed from command. His replacement immediately noticed that the troops were exhausted, demoralized, and terrified of their own leadership. The new commander stopped the decimations, improved conditions, and Italy started winning. Sometimes the problem is not the soldiers. 19. In 1946, Darryl Zanuck was the vice president of 20th Century Fox, one of the most powerful studios in Hollywood. When asked about the emerging technology of television, Zanuck was dismissive. Television won't be able to hold on to any market it captures after the first 6 months, he declared. People will soon get tired of staring at a plywood box every night. This prediction came from a man whose entire career was built on understanding what audiences wanted. He had produced countless successful films and helped build one of the most dominant entertainment companies in America. Yet he couldn't see that the plywood box would fundamentally transform how humans consume media. Within 2 decades, television was in nearly every American home. Movie attendance plummeted. Studios scrambled to compete. Fox eventually became part of a media empire that included, yes, television networks. Zanuck's prediction didn't age 6 months well. It aged about as poorly as any entertainment industry forecast ever made. 20. On June 28, 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria survived an assassination attempt in Sarajevo when a bomb thrown at his car bounced off and exploded behind him. Later that day, his driver Leopold Leuke took a wrong turn while navigating the unfamiliar city streets. Realizing his mistake, Leuke stopped the car to reverse. The engine stalled, and by pure cosmic coincidence, the car stopped directly in front of a sandwich shop where Gavrilo Princip, one of the failed morning assassins, was sitting and eating after giving up on the mission. Princip looked up, saw the Archduke sitting motionless in a stalled car 5 feet away, pulled out his pistol, and fired twice. Both the Archduke and his wife died. This assassination triggered a chain of alliances and declarations that became World War I, which killed approximately 20 million people and reshaped the entire world. A wrong turn, a stalled engine, and a sandwich shop. The deadliest coincidence in human history. 21. In 1958, Chairman Mao Zedong launched the 4 Pests campaign as part of China's Great Leap Forward. The 4 pests targeted for elimination were rats, flies, mosquitoes, and sparrows. The sparrows made the list because they ate grain seeds, and Mao decided China would grow more food if these thieving birds were eliminated. Citizens across China banged pots and pans to prevent sparrows from landing until the birds fell from exhaustion. They destroyed nests and killed chicks. Within 2 years, the sparrow population collapsed. What Mao hadn't considered was that sparrows also ate insects. Lots of insects, particularly locusts. Without natural predators, locust populations exploded across China. They devoured far more crops than the sparrows ever had. This ecological disaster contributed directly to the Great Chinese Famine, one of the deadliest famines in human history, killing an estimated 15 to 55 million people between 1959 and 1961. Mao eventually removed sparrows from the pest list and added bedbugs instead. But by then, the damage was done. 22. Louis Slotin was a Canadian physicist working on the Manhattan Project, specifically conducting criticality experiments to determine how much fissile material was needed for a nuclear chain reaction. His method involved bringing two beryllium-coated plutonium hemispheres close together using a screwdriver to keep them separated. Other scientists called this tickling the dragon's tail. On May 21, 1946, Slotin was demonstrating this procedure to colleagues when his screwdriver slipped. The hemispheres closed, the room filled with a blue flash of radiation, and Slotin instantly received a lethal dose. He quickly separated the spheres with his bare hands, stopping the reaction and saving the lives of the 7 other people in the room. But for Slotin, it was over. He died 9 days later from acute radiation poisoning. The plutonium core involved in this accident had already killed another scientist 8 months earlier in a similar mishap. It became known as the Demon Core and was eventually melted down. Some dragons should not be tickled. 23. Adam Osborne founded Osborne Computer Corporation and in 1981 released the Osborne 1, the first commercially successful portable computer. It was a hit. Sales were strong. The company was growing rapidly. Then Osborne made a mistake that would immortalize his name in business schools forever. In 1983, while the Osborne 1 was still the company's only product generating revenue, Osborne publicly announced the upcoming Osborne Executive and Osborne Vixen models, describing them as faster and better in every way. The announcement was meant to build excitement. Instead, customers immediately stopped buying the Osborne 1. Why purchase an inferior product when superior versions were coming soon? Sales collapsed virtually overnight. But the new models weren't ready for production, and the company had no income while waiting. Osborne Computer Corporation filed for bankruptcy in September 1983. This phenomenon, where announcing future products kills sales of current products, is now officially called the Osborne effect. The cure for success: telling everyone better things are coming. 24. In October 1940, Benito Mussolini decided to invade Greece. His motivation was largely jealousy, as Hitler had been conquering Europe without consulting his Italian ally, and Mussolini wanted his own military triumph. He gave the order without adequate preparation, supplies, or even winter equipment, despite invading as the weather turned cold. The Greeks were supposed to collapse quickly. Instead, they counterattacked ferociously and pushed the Italian army back into Albania. Mussolini's invasion became a humiliating disaster. Hitler was furious. Germany had been planning Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union, for spring 1941. Now Hitler had to divert forces to bail out Mussolini by conquering Greece and Yugoslavia first. This delayed Barbarossa by approximately 5 to 6 weeks. When German forces finally invaded the USSR, they reached the outskirts of Moscow just as the brutal Russian winter arrived. Many historians argue those lost weeks made the difference between German victory and the frozen catastrophe that followed. 25. Harry Randall Truman, no relation to the president, owned the Mount St. Helens Lodge at Spirit Lake in Washington state for over 50 years. When scientists warned in early 1980 that the volcano was showing signs of imminent eruption, authorities ordered evacuations. Harry refused to leave. He was 83 years old, and this mountain was his home. He gave interviews to reporters, posed for photographs, and became a folk hero for his stubborn independence. "The mountain and me have prior arrangements," he said. "I'm going to stay right here." He compared himself to the captain going down with his ship. On May 18, 1980, Mount St. Helens erupted with a force equivalent to 27,000 nuclear bombs. A lateral blast traveling at 300 miles per hour vaporized everything within 8 miles. Harry Truman and his lodge were buried under approximately 150 feet of volcanic debris. His body was never recovered. He got exactly what he wanted, and he got exactly what scientists told him would happen. 26. When Richard Nixon installed a secret recording system in the White House in 1971, he intended to create a historical record that would prove his greatness to future generations. Every conversation in the Oval Office, the cabinet room, and on certain phones would be captured for posterity. Nixon wanted evidence of his diplomatic brilliance. What he got was evidence of criminal conspiracy. The tapes captured Nixon discussing using the CIA to obstruct the FBI's investigation into the Watergate break-in. They recorded him approving hush money payments to burglars. They preserved him using ethnic slurs and making paranoid statements about his enemies. When the tape's existence became public during the Watergate investigation, Nixon fought all the way to the Supreme Court to keep them secret. He lost. The transcripts destroyed any remaining support for his presidency. Nixon resigned in August 1974. He had built the most comprehensive self-incrimination device in political history, recording himself committing the crimes that ended his career. 27. Mobutu Sese Seko ruled Zaire, now the Democratic Republic of Congo, for over 3 decades while systematically looting his country into poverty. Among his many extravagances, one stands out for sheer absurdity. He built a runway capable of landing the Concord supersonic jet near his palace in Gabatalite, a remote town in the jungle with no other modern infrastructure. The Concord, operated by Air France and British Airways, was the fastest commercial aircraft ever built, flying between Paris and New York in under 4 hours. Mobutu would charter Concord flights from Paris to Gabatalite, specifically to go shopping in France. He would fly to Paris, buy luxury goods, and return home the same day. Meanwhile, his citizens had no clean water, no electricity, no roads, and no future. Mobutu's personal fortune at its peak was estimated at $5 billion, roughly equal to Zaire's entire national debt. He died in exile in 1997. The Concord runway in the jungle still exists, crumbling and unused. 28. In 1928, Henry Ford decided that rubber was too important to import from British colonies, so he would grow his own in the Brazilian Amazon. He purchased an area the size of Connecticut and built an American town called Fordlandia, complete with neat rows of houses, fire hydrants, a hospital, schools, and a golf course. The rubber trees were planted in neat rows, American style. The workers were forced to eat American food, attend square dances, live in American-style houses unsuited for tropical heat, and were forbidden from drinking alcohol, smoking, or keeping women in their housing. The jungle rejected all of it. Rubber trees planted in rows caught diseases and pests that forests naturally prevent. Brazilian workers rioted against the forced Americanization. Managers fled into the jungle to escape angry mobs. Caterpillars ate the leaves. Fungi killed the roots. After 20 years and millions of dollars, Fordlandia produced essentially zero usable rubber. Ford sold it back to Brazil in 1945 for a massive loss. The ruins still stand, being slowly consumed by the jungle. 29. On the night of April 14, 1912, the SS Californian was stopped in an ice field in the North Atlantic, approximately 10 to 20 miles from where the RMS Titanic struck an iceberg. Captain Stanley Lord had wisely decided to wait until morning to proceed through the dangerous ice. His wireless operator tried to warn the Titanic about the ice, but was cut off mid-transmission by the Titanic's annoyed radio man, who was busy sending passenger messages. The operator then went to bed. Later that night, officers on the Californian observed strange lights and rockets on the horizon. White rockets, the international signal for distress. They woke Captain Lord twice to report these signals. Lord asked if they were company signals, was told they weren't, and went back to sleep. He ordered no further action. The Californian sat stationary through the night while over 1,500 people died in freezing water less than an hour's sailing away. Lord insisted for the rest of his life that the rockets were not distress signals. History disagrees. 30. Trofim Lysenko was a Soviet agronomist who rose to power under Stalin by promising to revolutionize Soviet agriculture. His method? Rejecting genetics entirely. Lysenko believed in a theory called Lamarckism, which held that organisms could pass on traits acquired during their lifetime. If you exposed wheat seeds to cold, their offspring would be cold-resistant. If you trained plants to grow in harsh conditions, their descendants would inherit that training. This is not how biology works. But Lysenko convinced Stalin that genetics was bourgeois pseudoscience, and that Mendelian inheritance was a capitalist plot. Scientists who disagreed were fired, imprisoned, or executed. Soviet biology was set back decades. Agricultural policies based on Lysenko's theories contributed to massive crop failures and famines. Genetics wasn't taught in Soviet schools until the 1960s. Real scientists around the world were advancing DNA research while Soviet biologists were pretending chromosomes didn't matter, because one charlatan convinced a dictator that wishful thinking could replace reality. 31. Sergeant Shoichi Yokoi was a Japanese soldier stationed on Guam when American forces invaded in 1944. As the Japanese defense collapsed, Yokoi and several companions fled into the jungle rather than surrender or die in a suicidal charge. Over the years, his companions died, but Yokoi remained hidden, surviving on snails, frogs, rats, and coconuts. He wove clothing from plant fibers and lived in an underground cave he dug himself. He knew the war had ended. He found leaflets. He occasionally heard people speaking Japanese. But Yokoi had been raised to believe surrender was the ultimate shame. His orders had been to fight, and nobody had officially told him to stop. On January 24, 1972, two local hunters stumbled upon him while checking shrimp traps. Yokoi initially attacked them before being subdued. He had been hiding for 28 years. When he returned to Japan, he famously said, "It is with much embarrassment that I return." He became a celebrity and lived until 1997. His official reason for not surrendering: there was never an order to do so. 32. In September 1938, British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain flew to Munich to negotiate with Adolf Hitler over Germany's demands for Czechoslovakian territory. Hitler had been making aggressive noises about the Sudetenland, a region of Czechoslovakia with ethnic German population. Europe stood on the brink of war. Chamberlain, desperate to avoid another catastrophic conflict like World War I, agreed to let Germany annex the Sudetenland in exchange for Hitler's promise that this was his last territorial demand in Europe. Chamberlain flew home, stepped off the plane, and waved a piece of paper bearing Hitler's signature. "I believe it is peace for our time," he declared to cheering crowds. 11 months later, Germany invaded Poland. 6 years and approximately 70 million deaths later, World War II ended. Chamberlain's name became synonymous with naive appeasement, the belief that giving dictators what they want will satisfy them. He died in 1940, having lived just long enough to see how catastrophically wrong he had been. 33. When Tsar Nicholas II was crowned in May 1896, the Russian Empire organized a massive public celebration at Kudinka Field near Moscow. Free gifts would be distributed to the common people. Commemorative cups, sausages, pretzels, and gingerbread, all stamped with the imperial seal. An estimated 500,000 people gathered overnight in the field. Rumors spread that there weren't enough gifts for everyone. When distribution began, the crowd surged forward. People were crushed against barriers and trampled underfoot. The field had been used for military training and was covered in trenches and pits that people fell into and couldn't escape. In approximately 15 minutes, nearly 1,400 people died. The newly crowned Tsar was informed of the tragedy and faced a decision: attend a scheduled ball at the French ambassador's residence that evening or cancel in mourning. His advisors convinced him that canceling would insult France. Nicholas went to the ball and danced while his subjects' bodies were still being collected. The Russian public never forgave him. Historians cite Kudinka as the beginning of the end for the Romanov dynasty. Every single person on this list woke up that morning thinking they were the smart one in the room. Now here's what's going to start a war in the comments. I want you to name one person alive today, a leader, a CEO, anyone famous, who you're absolutely certain will end up on a list like this in 50 years. Who's currently making the catastrophic mistake we'll all be laughing at later. Most upvoted name gets pinned. And if you made it this far without subscribing, that might be your entry onto a future list, like if your answer is better than mine.